One thing you don't do is go grocery shopping when you're hungry. They say that going grocery shopping when you're hungry just kind of gives you more of an opportunity to give in to temptation, and like buying things that you don't necessarily need, things you just kind of want at that time, right? So when I was in college seminary, what I would do is I would fast all day, and then I would go and wander through the Hy-Vee bakery. And I would do this intentionally to practice mastering the temptation and like self-mastery and discipline. Yeah. And I would buy nothing, just so we're clear. I would not give in. In our gospel today, we hear this reflection of Jesus Christ in his time in the wilderness, or the time in the desert. And so one thing we need to remember is that the word desert and wilderness are used interchangeably. So desert, when we think of that, we think of, like just a bunch of sand, but, it often is just an uninhabited place where there is no civilization, and there is lots of rock and no plants or food. So that's this place where Jesus was led into. And comparatively so, we hear how the Israelites, when they fled Israel and escaped Israel and went into, as they're journeying into the promised land, they took a little detour for like 40 years and also went to the wilderness or the desert. And when they were there, they did some similar things to Jesus. So we can see the comparative nature between the two. How Israel goes into the desert, goes into the wilderness, and they experience a number of temptations by the Lord. And Jesus now enters into the wilderness or into the desert and is tempted by the devil. But the difference between them is that where Israel failed, Jesus Christ succeeded. Israel was tempted numerous times. They were tested by the Lord, and they gave in to that temptation. Now, an example of that, we hear how shortly after they escaped Egypt, they were like, we want to go back to Egypt because there we had all this food and we could eat whatever we wanted and blah, blah, blah. And then God's like, fine, shut up. And he gives them all manna for just as one more example of God consistently taking care and coming to the aid of these whiny Israelite people. Now, Christ, he enters into the wilderness. He enters into this situation. And Christ also hungry. Christ is shown by the devil these stones in front of him. He's like, if you are really the Son of God and you're hungry, turn these stones into bread and feed yourself. And what does Christ say? One does not live on bread alone. And so we see where Israel demanded from God that they give them something to eat. These Israelites demanded this. And Jesus overcomes that temptation. Where Israel they felt that they needed this bread. Otherwise, they felt that God was not going to take care of them. They felt that what they had wasn't enough. And Christ, knowing, he's like, that's not a need. That is a want for me right now. He's like, but man does not live on bread alone. And so we see Jesus clearly triumph over that same temptation that Israel failed miserably and gave into this temptation. And so, my brothers and sisters, what we can see constantly playing out in our own lives day to day is where we're conflicted with this temptation. Choose one. I don't care. There's a million of them. with all these temptations, are they needs or are they wants? Do we need this? Or do we just really want this right now? You know, like when I would go into Hy-Vee, hungry, in the bakery, and there was pie and cookies and donuts. Did I need any of that? No. I was not going to die if I didn't have it. I just really wanted it because I had deprived myself of this. I didn't feel like I had it. I didn't have enough at that time. I could have had more. And so for us, my brothers and sisters, Jesus, I think, kind of clearly demonstrates this understanding of need versus want. A lot of times we think that we need so much. We think that we need this comfort and this luxurious life. And Jesus shows us that we don't need all of those things. Truly, the only thing that we need is God alone. The only thing that we've ever needed was God, and he's been there that entire time. We saw this in the economy of salvation from beginning to end, how God journeyed with these people out of Israel, never leaving their side, although every single time the Israelites felt that God wasn't coming to their beck and call, that they needed something else, that they needed this, they needed that. If they just would have been sat back for a hot minute, maybe everything would have been fine. They didn't understand this. They didn't see how we can triumph over this. And that's where Christ came into the picture, to show us that we can triumph over these temptations. That we can just simply look upon these temptations. Is this something I need? Or is this something that I just really want right now? So as we enter, this is the first week of Lent, and as we enter into the rest of these 40 days, my brothers and sisters, let us very reflectively think about our lives. Are these things that we are tempted by, are these things that we have, are they needs or are they wants? And what do we truly need?